Hello guys, this is an update video to a process that we've talked about in the past, starting to build a racetrack for NASCAR 2003 or any other game. The basis for this would be the same whether you're using it in Sandbox or putting the satellite image on a ground plane object in 3ds Max. The process still applies to both. So regardless of whether you're using Sandbox for NASCAR 2003 or putting this on a ground plane in 3ds Max for another newer game, the process would be the same. In the other video we talk about how to stitch the high resolution images together. A couple issues that popped up during recent streams. Using Google Earth Pro desktop version, zooming in and out can cause the tilting and panning to get skewed. So I want to show that setting in here just to make sure that's covered in a video. So it'd be under where's that? Tools, Options. So up here under Tools, Options, go to the Navigation tab here at the top, and yours will probably be set to one of these two here. Set that to under Navigation, do not automatically tilt while zooming. You can mess around with these settings to make it zoom in and out faster and different things like that, but I don't mess with any of that. All it is, change the navigation to do not automatically tilt while zooming. Using that setting, any of these other settings other than that will cause you headaches. So go ahead and hit apply on that, and so now when you zoom in and out, it shouldn't tilt, so it keeps the same aspect. Should be always down or looking straight top down, which is what you want. That can result in some skewing, misalignment and things like that, so you definitely don't want that. I've talked about in the other video of how to use the keyboard to move around, zoom in. I mean, you can zoom in as far as you want to, and you can see the individual styrofoam blocks, but you see how many images you would be stitching together to get that kind of resolution. Is that kind of resolution necessary? Definitely not for NASCAR 2003, probably not for most modern games, but depending on the satellite image resolution, the image that you have to work with, I mean, you can get pretty darn detailed, but that creates a lot more work for you to do it that way, and the image ends up being gigantic. A track like Daytona, I would probably do no more than a 3 wide by 3 tall grid of images, and the size of the image would be the size of my desktop, basically, which in this case is 1440 by 900, I believe. So I'm not going to go through that process because we've talked about that in the other video and it covers it pretty well. Lining everything up and making one giant image out of that. Alright, so now that we have our satellite images stitched together, in the past we haven't really messed with trying to center the track in the image, and that's led to some problems that we've noticed. And what I mean by center the track is the way the track gets centered in Sandbox for NASCAR 2003. Just for efficiency and space layout, it makes sense to do this step, because in a racing game, obviously the racetrack is the most important, or the center of the world that you're in that environment. So excuse me, doing this process would really make a lot of sense. So what I'm going to do, I'm in Photoshop CS6, is I'm going to use the marquee tool, and I'm just going to create a box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a bounding box around the track. I'm not moving it around, I'm moving and selecting the edges. So what I want to do is right click inside of that and transform selection. So now I can resize that selection marquee. I'm basically going to put it on the points right here I'm looking at where the start finish line is. This is typically where we would take our measurements in Google Earth and Sandbox. I'm going to basically make a bounding box around the track surface. Again, I'm not moving this right here. I'm grabbing the edge and moving the edge over here. I'm not moving where the box was, and I'm going to do that on all four sides of the box. This is obviously for an oval track. For a road course, you're going to be a little bit different. Again, I don't want to move the marquee. I want to set it up a tad wide. You want to be careful not to get too much information inside of that. So we're going to zoom out. We're going to check, make sure everything is where we put it. Those are the measurement points that we would use for setting this up. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to hit Control C and copy that. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste special, paste into place. If I just paste it, it's going to center it in the window, which we want to do in a second, but not yet. First, I want it pasted in place over top of the original image, wherever it ends up. So once we do that, now we've got the track cut out from the background image, so I have to turn the layers on and off because it's easier for the video to see it. So I have the background layer, which is the entire thing. Turn the background layer off, and now we've got this section here. So the next thing I want to do is create a new image with that piece. You don't have to do it this way, but this will show it for the purpose of video. I'll put a linear guide at the 50% mark, both vertically and horizontally. I just did the same thing, didn't I? Yep. Horizontal, vertical, 50%. That's what I wanted to do. So 50%. So now that's the center. I know I've got two there on the horizontal, but for this it doesn't matter. So that is my center point of the bounding box, which is the center point of the racetrack. Hopefully that makes sense. Next thing we need to do is I'm going to create a 16 pixel by 16 pixel. I'm going to zoom way in here, pretty much as far in as it'll go. I'm going to flood fill the background, and Photoshop, when you zoom in that far on a small texture, it gives you a grid. If you wanted to get rid of that, you can hit Control H and turn the grid off, but I'll leave it on. It actually helps for the purposes of this. So I'm going to switch back to another color. What I found in my testing worked pretty well was to actually just make a box like this. Do your diagonal. So doing it like that, we end up with an X. Fairly decent size. You'll be able to see it zooming in. So again, I'm going to copy it, Control C, copy it. I'm going to switch back over to the bounding image that we cropped out of the other one. I'll go ahead and paste that in the center, and if you'll notice, let me see here. %. It's almost centered. It's strange, in my test it worked perfectly, but I'm assuming it is, yeah, it's 1 pixel off of center basically, or it's actually 1.5 pixels off center. So obviously I was a little bit more precise in my original cropping that I did during practice run of this video. So you want to be as precise as possible when you're making that transform selection, so that's why it's not exactly centered in that X. Let's just take a look at the vertical as well, just to see. Again, I'm doing this quickly for video, so my horizontal, or excuse me, my vertical line is actually dead center. So that's interesting. Even an odd number of pixels, you're talking about darn close there, but you can see even doing that just a pixel and a half off or a pixel off, it's going to be that much off by the time you get to this point. So the closer you can get that to where you want it to be, or where it should be, the better that's going to end up. I'll go ahead and merge that into one layer. I'm going to go ahead and, for the purposes of this video, instead of redoing everything, just keep moving. But obviously you want to be a little bit more careful than I was there. So we've got the center point merged into one layer. I'm going to copy that back into my original image, and I am going to paste special, paste into place, and it did not retain that. Alright, made a liar out of me. That worked in my tests. Okay, well, luckily I have snaps, so I can snap it back where it goes. Just want to make darn sure that this, luckily I still have the other layer in there, so I can pretty much snap it to where that is by looking at, hopefully that shows up. I have to zoom way in so it shows up on the video. But if I hit the down arrow to move this one, the top one, hopefully you can see the other one pops up behind it. If I go down 1 pixel, it's covering it up. You can do the same thing on the top here and look at the top when I go down. Same thing on the left and right, make sure that's lined up. So hopefully that shows up. You can also turn it on and off. You shouldn't see any movement. Let's say if I moved that, you can see you get a jump. Obviously that's exaggerated, but so if I had it 1 pixel off and I turn it on and off, you can see it jump. So it needs to be 100% over where it was. This one I'm going to turn off. I'm going to turn the background on. Same thing. Turn this on and off. You shouldn't see any image jumping. And now what I should have is that image with the centerpiece. So the next thing I'm going to do is go over here, turn the background image off. I'm going to zoom in. What I'm going to do let's see, marquee tool, make a square, or roughly a square here. Shortcut, you can hold shift and it'll make a square. That's another way to do that if you want to make it a perfect square. It doesn't really actually matter, but we'll make it a perfect square. So now I've added a square to the outside of that. The other thing I can do is turn that off with that marquee still there. Make sure I'm on the background layer. Make a pink square right there on the background layer. I now have a pink square added to both of those. So if I zoom out, turn the background off, it's in the exact same place. Turn the top layer off, it's still in the same place. On both of these layers have that pink square in the exact same place, but that's on the edge of it, so I can use that for alignment purposes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the original image here, I'm going to go ahead and put my guides in. There's multiple different ways you can do this part of it depending on the paint program you're using. And then let's make a horizontal guide at 50%. So now what I need to do is on this layer, this layer here, zoom in, and at this point I can go ahead and get that exactly centered. You may end up wanting to do it the way it was, which I believe was like that, or it was actually a pixel and a half, which is not possible in this particular case. Go ahead and line it up just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the background image, and you can kind of see, oops, make sure you have the right layer selected when you get a move tool. I'm trying to do this in a hurry, and it's not working for me, but make sure you're on the background layer, and make sure your upper layer is centered on your center point of your image. So these crosshairs, let me turn it off. These crosshairs are at 0, 0 in the middle of this 4096 by 4096 image. I now have the bounding box selected track surface centered on that center point with an overhanging lip on it that I can use to line up the background image. So now that I'm on the background image, it's locked, so I need to copy that into another layer so I can move it. That little lock icon, I can't move the background, but now what I can do is go over here and align that. You can kind of see it lining up. You can kind of see how that works. You get that image shift. So right there, it's hanging over. Right there, it's hanging over as well. So if I go up, it's overhanging. If I go down, you see the movement down here. So right there, again, turn the layers on and off. You can verify that you're in the right place. Doing that way, I now need to fill in some missing information, so I'm going to create a new layer. You can see there's transparency, and I don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and make a flood fill black layer behind everything, so now I got a black base layer. The image background that I originally moved, which is now centered properly, and then my alignment layer, which really isn't necessary at this point, but it does have my little center mark on it, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that in there. You can see that is now dead center of the image, so that fixes our background image issues. I'm going to go ahead and save this as I always call it a ground. We'll call it Daytona video, just for the purpose of the video so I can see it. We'll save that as a BMP. This is a very large texture, so this isn't going to show up very well. Open Windmap. Make sure you can see this. It is this one. So this is probably going to eat up most of my memory doing this while recording. So I'm going to change that to a MIP. And I'm going to save it. Make sure you can see this. A-ground Daytona video.mip. I'm going to save that. Take my hand off the mouse and wait until it gets done doing what it's doing, because if you click anywhere right now, lock the computer up more than likely, or at least the program. So appears to be done. See a file on my desktop right there, ground Daytona video.mip. I'm not working on any track in particular, so this is just for demo purposes. I'm just going to throw it into here, and I can get all that onto the video screen here so you can see it. A-ground Daytona video. Bear with me while I get Sandbox going here. Obviously it's a very buggy program, so bear with me. Hopefully it cooperates while recording. In this particular case, I've already got a track set up. I'll just go ahead and open that. Let me zoom out. So this particular image, I've got the stuff in here. What I'm going to go ahead and do is, well, we'll leave it in here. Do it this way. You can open the original track. We covered this in other videos, so just open that track so it knows what folder you're in. Hit New. Create a straight background image. And that did not work, so I'm going to have to go ahead and save it in here. We'll just call track video. So we'll save it in that folder. That's where we put it. Automatically center, yes. And I'm going to go ahead and close it and then reopen it. And we'll go ahead and open that track back up. Alright, so one thing, so it's locked right now, so I'm just curious. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the numbers down here. I want to know right now where is 0, 0 is right here on this mark. So that's where it thinks 0, 0 is right now. So if I go linear guide, it's interesting. It spit out the linear guide over here on the center of the track though. That's interesting. Just taking notes. Some of this is new to me. I'm going to go ahead and click on background image. We'll come back to that linear guide in just a second. So we'll put the image up here, a ground Daytona video. Let's see, did it save that? No, it did not. Okay. Let me go into here. I'm going to do this super quickly, so it may not be very accurate. Daytona is kind of nice because it has a mark for the start finish line on the back stretch, so it's easy to get this vertical measurement. You can see there's a start finish line marking on the back stretch here, so that should be a straight line. Move this over here so you can see it. So that is 811.27 meters is what that's measuring. Pretty close to what I had during the testing. I'm going to go ahead and try to grab that, not the track. I'm going to put that back over there. So what I believe what's going on is it's thinking that the center is right there, so that would be actually centered. That part's not important because obviously you're going to build a track and this is going to move. What I need to know right now is I need to know I need to get this sized up correctly. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as humanly possible here, so it is not going to be highly accurate. Obviously you're going to spend a lot more time than what I'm doing. So right now I learned a few things. What was the measurement that I needed? 811, so we've got to get way bigger. That's fine. We'll come down to try to get that number 811 right there. The other thing, it's hard to do while I've got the mouse on there, but if you notice down here, the 6.62, I need to get that at 0 or as close as possible to 0 to make this line straight up and down. And then you'll notice when I do that, another problem occurs. Let me get that number again, 811.27. Don't want to spend a super big amount of time on this, but 27. While maintaining it in a vertical orientation, so 27 at 0, 0. I mean, that's probably close enough right there. 811.27 at 0, 0, so that's a vertical line. Now what we can do is we can take this back up here. We can set that onto our center point right there. And now what we can do is go ahead and adjust our background image, and theoretically we should not have to mess with our center XY measurements. So if I make that 2300, I think this might be too big. Nope, needs to be bigger. Let's get 2450. Oops, 2450. Still needs to be bigger. Let's go 25. A little bit bigger. 2550. Obviously, you're going to spend a lot more time getting this perfect. It needs to be bigger than that. It's 2600. That's closer. Say 20. Alright, that's pretty close right there. So let's zoom in and see where we're at. We are darn close right there. So the issue with this particular track, looks like we need to go up just a little bit more. Let's go 25, 25. Couldn't find it there for a second. Yeah, that's pretty darn close. So what the issue ended up being on this one was the rotation was off a little bit, and I bet if we could very carefully sneak up on it, we would see, yeah, I can kind of see it, the rotation's a little bit off. So when I lined up pit road on my screen, I didn't have it perfectly aligned like I should have. And the result of that ends up being that this start-finish line, so you've got this, actually you have to set both ends, so that may not be 100% accurate either. I've got, so let's doing this live, so 81127, so I've got to maintain my length at 81127, and I also got to try to get this end at 0. Very minute movements. Okay, so that's at 0. In theory, this should be at 0, so I think what I was just saying does apply. So somehow that moved. I'm curious if it's possible to do this. It may not be. See if I can zoom in. I know that's on white background, and you definitely will not be able to see that because I can barely see it. So now that's at 0. The center point is not at 0. That's interesting. And what happens up here? That's at 0. I'm not sure how that works. It might be because of the... Oh, I know why. That center point was measuring this. So if I move that, yeah, okay, so it was trying to measure, it was displaying this even though I wasn't, because this was underneath. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't care about the segment. This doesn't make any difference at this point. This can be over here, but I'm going to leave it close to center. All I needed to know was you do need to set both ends at 0, world 0, not segment 0, because the segments are going to change. I don't care about that. But yeah, my image did not end up being rotated correctly, is what I was trying to get to there. So this is probably, at this point you would check your other measurement, and if you've done everything correctly, it should be spot on. But obviously check it and make sure. You know, check a few other objects like we talked about in the other video. Check the other objects, make sure your garages measure correctly from Google Earth to in here. just double check before you start building your racetrack. I'm going to go ahead and save this as video 2, and I'm curious, it does not bark at me for centering the track. I have not gone through the process past this point. I believe if you've done everything correctly, and this is the true center point of your outline track, and you outline, I'll just move that. At this point it doesn't matter because I just saved it. But at this point, what I highly recommend, I cannot stress this enough, I highly recommend you put your center line on the outside wall. The center line does not matter on the racing surface. It doesn't have to be in the middle. It doesn't have to be on your racing groove. I highly suggest you put your center line of the racetrack on the outside wall so that you can maintain the correct arc of each segment. I say outside wall because on a short track you may end up being too small of a diameter for it to work correctly. I'm not going to go into details on that. I need to end the video quickly here, but some other helpful hints that I've gotten from recent streams was when you start laying out the track, put your center line on the outside wall, so as you're making your curves, I can make that line follow that wall around the track. You see how easy it is to follow the correct arc. Larger tracks, putting it on the inside, you can get away with it, and it may end up being a little bit cleaner and look a little bit better. But if you put it on the outside, it will end up being centered when you're done. The other tip that I would suggest is to go ahead and take your linear guide, set up your first segment, basically what you want to do is move your outer X section 300 meters out. This is on an oval track, 300 meters out from your center line or the outside wall. Move it out from the outside wall 300 meters. Set that up now. Maybe go ahead and put in 2 F sections if you want to, your one that's near your wall and one that's near your inside. You could technically do the same thing if you wanted to move that in just a little bit. I would not move it in all the way down here, especially on a smaller oval. You may run into issues, so when you're doing your initial layout, probably want to have this as close to the edge of pit road as possible, which I think is up here. So, you know, the way we build tracks is we build the infield object right up to the pit road wall. Infield wall seems to be the way we're the general consensus on that. But I would not recommend maybe bring that up to the grass in this particular case. You can do it this way, but on a tight corner, which obviously Daytona doesn't have, you may run into issues where you can't bring your arc to match the actual arc enough, and I'm not going to try to cover all that in this video, but we'll go into that in greater detail on the streams and in future videos. So one thing I forgot to mention is you can save the track once you have that set up correctly. Reopen the track, and again, I don't care about the track segments. That's going to change. Obviously, I'm going to move the segments up to the racing surface and lay that out. Reopen the track and turn on the linear guide, and if the linear guide shows up dead center where your center point was, then everything's obviously centered. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's a way you can test after you're done, is when you first turn the linear guide on after opening the track, it pops up at 0, 0. Again, it's trying to display the segment info if I go over here. So I moved the segment out of the way. Obviously the segment isn't going to be in the center of the track. It's going to be around the center of the track. But so when it's out of the way, to make sure it's still centered, turn the linear guide on, and if you look down here in the bottom corner, it's at 0, 0. So that kind of proves that theory as far as it being centered. So, all right, thanks for watching.